Thank you for joining us again. We are excited to have you, and hopefully our information will be valuable to you today. So I am Yulia Molodoy, and we are both counselors with the Gifted and Talented Department. I service gifted students at the middle school level, and Molly here is our high school counselor. Today, we want to talk to you about resilience, and we'll provide you with some practical strategies on how to increase it for yourselves and for your students. And we all need this type of resilience, so we need to build this during these times more than ever. So here we go.
Yulia, give me just, okay, it's there.
Thank you. Before we go into the actual resilience piece, we just wanted to give you a brief overview about stress and anxiety, just because that's important. That's kind of the basis of, it's the thing that detracts us from resilience. So we want to be aware of these signs and symptoms so we can identify them and then be able to build on resilience. So you may or may not know too much about what stress is and how it shows up, but basically it can show up in many areas in our whole bodies as a person. So stress shows up as physical symptoms in our bodies, anywhere from just fatigue and difficulty sleeping to increased or decreased appetite. It just depends on the person. We're also unique, so it can be very different for different people. Also, thoughts we can have, we can start being forgetful or worry, or even in more extreme cases, we can have a sense of losing sense of reality, and maybe even thoughts of self-harm. And that also applies to your children, of course, so you want to watch for these kinds of signs. As far as behaviors go, many of these behaviors can be misinterpreted as defiant behavior by parents and even by teachers. So in fact, they may be actual signs of stress. So this is why it's important to know that if a student is displaying avoidance or, aggressive behaviors, that might be really because they're stressed. Also, so let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Getting used to, yes. Now, these behaviors can be displayed in students and adults. We have different ones listed here, but really like tantrums or avoidance behavior can be displayed by adults as well and children. So these are all good indicators of stress, and we just want you guys to be able to recognize stress in yourselves, because it's very important to know that. And children can actually sense these things too, and they could also become stressed and anxious. And it's really easy to do these days with everything going on out there in the world. So being aware of it, and then we will provide strategies on how to handle these things. Next slide, please. This is a good visual of how we use this for students, but really it can be applied to us too as adults. It just shows us different things that can happen when we have anxiety or stress in ourselves or in children. So This list is not all inclusive, but it provides a variety of things visually, so your child can experience difficulty sleeping, or chandeliering. I found this term interesting. So if your child just all of a sudden seems um, to burst out for no apparent reason, if they just get angry with something that doesn't make much sense, that could be a sign of stress. If they can't focus as well, and stress also, one of the main things in stress is avoidance. We avoid doing those things that we're afraid of. Okay, let's see. Thank you. So now I will hand it over to Molly for to go into the actual resilience piece, and we'll share a few strategies with you on how to build it and strengthen it.
Thanks, Julia. So good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the importance of resilience and strategies that parents can use to build their own resilience, and also ways that parents can support their children. And we define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And I think we can all fairly say that with the pandemic and the school closures and the hybrid learning programs and the distance learning programs, we've all been under a lot more stress than we're used to. Life definitely has not been normal. Many of us are out of our normal routines, and we're not getting to do the activities or spend time with the people that we're used to being with. So for those reasons, we have thought it would be really great to talk about resiliency and how we can build our strength and resilience during these uncharted times. It's important to know that we're all born with different degrees of resiliency, but resilience is not a personality trait. It really is something that can be learned with practice and with intention. So that really gives me hope that we all are dealing with stress and anxiety and the unknown, but with practice, we can do things to alleviate stress, not eliminate it, but to lessen it. And so that's really what we want to focus on. The way that building resilience helps us get through these challenging times, and also the way that we can grow and learn through adversity. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be discussing 4 different components of resilience, and focusing on these 4 separate areas can help us to learn from these challenges and actually maybe improve our lives for the better. So the first component that I want to focus on is connection. Could you turn to the next slide, please? So when we talk about building our connections, the first thing that I think of is, how do we prioritize our relationships? So during these times, it's really important that as parents and as children, that we surround ourselves with people that we feel cared by, loved by, and supported by. So for some of us, that might just be one or two people in our lives, but just knowing that we have someone in our life that supports us and understands us is a huge, huge protective factor. The next thing that's a way to build a connection would be joining a group. So a group could mean many different things to many different people. Joining a group, it could be a church group, it could be a friend group, it could be joining an activity. I know that there are kids that haven't been able to do their regular sports, but now it seems like those sports teams are being allowed to practice. So those kind of groups are very supportive to children. So there are different kinds of groups that we can also maybe volunteer for soup kitchen or a homeless shelter, or provide some kind of volunteer service. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the importance of seeking help. So it's really important to know as parents, and when we are thinking about our children, there might be times that we do need to seek professional help. So that's something to think about. I just wanted to say, and I didn't mention this before, but when we think about making connections with people, even though we're not meeting in person as much, I'm sure there are many people who are attending Zoom meetings such as this. And then there are also people, that you can reach by phone, by email. Kids are using FaceTime and Snapchat to connect. So there are lots of ways we can connect even though we're not in our normal routines. Next slide, please. So the next area that I wanted to discuss was wellness. And when we think of wellness, we really think of self-care. And self-care has to do with caring for the whole person. So we're talking about our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. One thing about self-care that I have to remind myself and many parents that I work with is that self-care is not self-indulgent. It's not selfish. It's really a necessity. And I know in these times, it's very difficult for parents to find time for themselves, but the better we do at caring for ourselves, the better we're going to be able to take care of our families and support the people that we love. So I'm going to talk about different ways that we practice self-care, but in looking at this slide, you can see that self-care really does help reduce stress and burnout. It helps improve positive emotions, motivation, and build relationships, and also supports our success and well-being at work and at school. Next slide. So when we talk about taking care of our body, we're talking about getting enough sleep, which is really hard for students sometimes, eating a healthy diet, getting regular exercise. All of these things reduce stress and anxiety. When we look at practicing mindfulness, we're talking about things like journaling, doing yoga, spiritual practices such as prayer or meditation. And then I think number 3 is really important, avoiding negative outlets, especially when we think about all of the news and social media that we have access to these days. I think it's so important for parents and for children to limit their exposure to social media and the news, and focus more on the other healthy things that we can do to support our well-being. And when we talk about negative outlets, we're also thinking about avoiding, overeating, avoiding substances that might be toxic to our system, such as drugs or alcohol. So just being mindful of the information that we're taking in, and not only the information, but the foods and the substances that we're putting in our bodies. Next slide. So here's a review of some self-care tips for parents, and these things are also true for children. I know many of you probably have students that are either on the hybrid or the distance learning program. So developing regular routines is really important. Kids really need that structure to feel a sense of normalcy, even though these aren't normal times. I think Yulia is going to talk more about maintaining a positive attitude, but cultivating hope and positivity are also huge protective factors. We talked about staying connected to friends and loved ones. And then finally, I just wanted to say, I know for parents, finding that me time in your schedule is often one of the hardest things to do. But I just really want to encourage you to think about what might you want to eliminate. If there are things that are taking up your time that really aren't serving you or aren't supporting your health and well-being, what might you want to eliminate from your schedule if you can, to create more time for self-care. So I'm wondering, I don't know if we have time. Do we have time to share something in the chat bar, or do we need to keep moving?
It's 5:54, so I think we have a couple of minutes if you want to share something. Yes.
Okay. So I'm just wondering, if you feel comfortable and you want to share in the chat bar something you might eliminate from your life to improve your self-care, or something from this list or elsewhere that you would like to try to enhance your self-care. So I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Is anyone seeing anything?
No, there's nothing here.
Okay, so this is just something, food for thought. Self-care, like I said, is such an important aspect that we often don't find time for. So I just want to encourage everyone to try to find a little bit of time for self-care, because it really does help us be better caretakers and workers, and just supports every aspect of our life. So I think we can move on to the next slide.
Great. So I would like to continue by addressing how to embrace healthy thoughts, which is one of our strategies for building resilience as an umbrella for these 4 things here on the slide. So we all know that change is part of life and that life isn't perfect, unfortunately. We all experience difficult times, especially now, but life is kind of ups and downs. And this just means accepting change just means that we have to work on being flexible with our goals, our ideals in life, and kind of be willing to adjust those as we go and recognize when certain goals may no longer be possible to achieve and just adjust with that. Because right now, this is a great example what happened with the pandemic. Maybe many of you had many plans for this year that kind of had to be canceled. Family events or traveling, or there's so many things that had to be put on hold for right now. So thinking about how can we just accept that and adjust from there, be flexible with that, instead of fighting it. That makes a big difference. Then keeping things in perspective. Here we think about the fact that we really know that the way we think affects how we feel. So we want to identify certain areas that we might have of thinking irrationally for certain things. And we want to replace that irrational thinking with a more balanced and realistic type of thinking. And in order to do that, you can ask yourself and your child, do you tend to catastrophize, for example, difficulties, or do you at times think or assume that the world is out to get you, or things like that? Just those negative things that we all at times have that we know they're not really rational. It's just self-talk, negative self-talk. So identifying those things really helps with changing the perspective. So just changing it to more healthy ways of thinking and thinking that things are okay, things are not going well right now, maybe, but that's not going to stay that way forever. It's going to change because it's part of life. Maintaining a hopeful outlook is pretty similar to keeping things in perspective. So we have a little quote here that I like: change the way you look at things and the things you look at will change. And that's really true, but it's hard to accept maybe in the moment when we're really feeling stressed. So of course, it's hard to stay positive when life isn't going our way. But what we can do to build more resilience is to expect that good things will happen to you in the future. Maybe right now it's not the way you want things, but expecting good things will bring with it actual good things to happen. Another strategy is you can visualize what you want and like picture it in your head, just for what your vision of the future is, your best one, and just visualize that, imagine that it's happening. And that will also bring along better things in your life. Also, working on not worrying about what you fear right now, or not worrying about things that haven't happened. And we're just making scenarios in our head of what if this happens, what if this happens? Well, it hasn't happened right now, so why worry about something that might not even happen? And lastly here, we want to talk about learning from our past. So you want to look back at, as a strategy for resilience, want to look back at what worked in the past when you had difficult situations happen, and respond, and that use that to respond effectively to new difficult situations. So you can ask yourself questions like, how was I able to find strength in the past? Also, what have I learned from these experiences to make my current experience better? So let's see, next slide is a visual, and we call it the wheel of control. We like to use this with our students as well, and you may find it useful and even go over this with your child at home, which is this helps us remember that we can't control current situations. We can't control what's outside of ourselves. Events, other people, those are things that we can't control. What we can control is what's inside of that wheel, which is anything that pertains to us. Anything from our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions to situations, how we, our attitude, so behaviors, anything that we do for ourselves as a consequence of what happens on the outside is what we can control. And it's very important to remember to focus on those things that are inside of that wheel, in order to allow us to reduce this. So it allows us to reduce the stress and anxiety, and it helps us take control over our lives as much as possible. And just remembering that the things we cannot control, we have to let that go and handle it the best we can. That's kind of a great strategy for resilience to remember. Let's go to the next one. So finally, the finding purpose was our fourth strategy for resilience, and it includes those four things here on the right. This has all been researched and it's been found to help build resilience. So helping others, and here we can talk about, when we talk about helping others, there are many ideas, things you can do. Molly already talked about volunteering, so that is one way you can help others, by volunteering. And also your students as well, if they volunteer, what that does, it provides a sense of purpose and self-worth, and it's really beneficial and positive for your self-esteem. And also helping others can come in other forms, such as supporting a good friend, calling someone you haven't spoke to in a long time and reminding them that you know they exist and that you're there for them, or helping them in whatever way they need. Okay, where my screen disappeared. The next thing, being proactive. When we talk about being proactive, what we want to do is to not accept being helpless. So even though we can't control a situation, but there's so much we can do. Yes, we know that we need to accept our emotions, and that's not what this is about. Yes, we accept our feelings during hard times, and they are normal. It's normal to have difficult feelings during hard times, but then right after that, we want to ask ourselves, what can I do about this problem in my life right now? Is there something even very small that I can do about it? So once you find that, okay, great. So we were on slide 16, two previous ones. Thank you. Yes, right there. So moving towards, I'm talking about being proactive. So just break it down into more manageable pieces. If it seems like a huge problem and you don't know where to start, you can just break it down. Just is there something today that I can do to make it better? Moving towards our goals. Here we just talk about, we want to develop realistic goals and we want to do something regularly, even something small. You can ask yourself, what is one thing I can accomplish today that will help me move in the direction that I want to go? And having goals is a really powerful, positive thing that will anchor you into action, and instead of feeling helpless about something. Finally, looking for opportunities for self-discovery. I wanted to mention this theory, if you may have heard of, it's called post-traumatic growth. And that explains that the fact that people can experience positive growth right after a traumatic event in their lives. So that just we know that hard things can make us stronger. And after a tragedy or hardship, people they actually have reported having better relationships and greater strength after those things. All right, next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Here is, we mentioned a lot of these things, but we have some more just tips and strategies on building resilience, which also help us build happiness. So giving thanks and practicing kindness, those are great things that go along with it. And they decrease stress, and those are great things to do. Also to instill those in your child. And it can come in many forms, and there are many videos out there or whatever. If you look up kindness and how to show kindness, gratitude, how to give thanks and gratitude, those are really, really good strategies to help us get outside of ourselves and think about others, and it empowers us and really gets us out of that negative thinking and feeling helpless and like there's no hope, which is pretty easy to do. So that, I think, covers our strategies for resilience. For the next slide, and in closing, we want to have our participants today do a little self-reflection. So think a little bit about what is a simple action that you can take today, or maybe tomorrow morning, starting tomorrow morning, that can include anything that we have mentioned from all of those strategies we went over today for resilience. Or anything else, if you really came up with some ideas while we were talking, something you can do today. It could be something very small, but that you would like to do, to start doing, so you can build and increase your resilience. I'm seeing comments coming in, so that is great. Something to take care of your body, like physical activities and things like that. And while the comments are going in the chat, maybe Molly can mention that we have some resources and we're available to, and then we will open it up for questions. But we'll also be available via email if you'd like to send us emails with more questions after the presentation is over.
Right, and I'm just wondering, is everybody able to see the chat, or do we need to say out loud the things that are being written into the chat?
Maybe we can mention a couple of the things that I'm going to mention that people has been sharing on our chat is exercising, call friends on the phone just to check in, start a fitness routine. And thank you everybody for participating. These are really good ideas, and getting on the treadmill more often. That's also finding some me time.
And I like the fact that everyone can see the chat, because everyone can get ideas from each other too, from this group. And I really like this last one I'm seeing from Sarah, and it's just really simple. Before getting out of bed, take 5 deep breaths and think of 3 things you're grateful for. And you, I've done that too, and it just gets your day started much better, and a positive mood, and your day just flows better. Thank you. And being okay with finding me time mentally, because that's hard for some people. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that too, and then I'll talk a little bit about the resources and we'll answer questions. But I know as parents, we often feel guilty taking that me time, and we tend to put ourselves last. And I just want to encourage everyone, like I said, to give yourself permission to take a little more me time. And I also liked the comment about gratitude. A lot of times what we'll do with our students we'll do gratitude journals, or we'll ask them to think of, 1, 2, or 3 things they're grateful for each day, because creating that sense of joy and hope and optimism really is a huge protective factor. And right now, as you know, with so much change and a lot of disappointment, just a lot of things that we were counting on that we haven't been able to do or practice, being able to focus on the gratitude and the silver linings can really just help alleviate stress and anxiety, and move us forward in whatever way we need to move forward right now. So thank you so much for sharing your personal reflections. And let's go on to the next slide.
Okay, give me just, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go through this quickly because this is something that I'm assuming we can get this presentation to you and you can go through this information on your own. This information, although we are from the Gifted and Talented department, the information that we're sharing is good for all children. So the first article is from the National Association of Gifted Children. And it really gives a good overview of some of the stresses and anxieties students are feeling during these times, and some great strategies for helping students at different age levels. So we have an English and a Spanish version of that document. The next document, Supporting Children's Mental Health Tips for Parents and Educators, is from the National Association of School Psychologists. And it's a very simple tip sheet that I've found helpful because it's just concise and direct, and it has some easy ways that we can support our children. The next page. Thanks. How to be a resilient parent is a great article. It's quick and easy to read. 6 daily questions during COVID is from the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. And if you don't know about that website, it has a plethora of amazing resources to support health and well-being. So mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. It's very holistic, and it's a very uplifting website. This article by Barbara Kerr is from the Davidson Academy. So if you do have a gifted student, it's very specific to gifted and really talking about how gifted children are very resilient. And it's nice to hear that perspective because gifted children aren't always perceived that way because of their sensitivities and emotional intensity. But it really talks about how gifted kids often have built-in strength and resiliency. And then this last article, I don't have a link to it. I do have the article, and if you have younger children, this article, the 10 ways to foster resilience in young children, teaching kids to bounce back, has some great strategies for younger children. So if you would like a copy of that article, please email me and I will send you the PDF.
Molly, can you please probably write your email so that way people know, or you have it right there, your email?
It's on our last page of the slide.
It's on the last page of the presentation. If you want to skip to the end, because that's the end of the resources, and then there's our contact information. So if you have questions or need resources, or if we can support you or your family in any way, that's the best way to reach us. And right now, I guess, we have about 10 minutes for questions. Is that
correct? Yes.
Okay.
And so far, I don't have any questions right now. Let me see in the top if somebody wrote something. But so far, nobody have wrote any questions right now. So if you have any questions, this is the time to do it right now. We have about 10 minutes. You can do it here on our Q&A or the chat.
There is one question though in the chat, Anya, and is how can we help our kids get through the amount of work being assigned without them feeling like failures?
I can attempt, and Molly, if you want to add something, or one thing that they're experiencing in specifically for the distance learning students and that I've encountered in the magnet students, there have been some huge or more higher amounts of work in their electives. And I don't know if that's specifically what you're referring to. But that has had to do with Edgenuity, the platform of the electives done online that were designed for online learning, but not the distance learning that we're doing now. So with that, we're learning as we go, and those electives have been adjusted and to reduce the amount of work. So it's been a lot of extra work, I should say. But we also work with students on the issue of perfectionism, and we want to help them, yes, not to feel like failures, by encouraging them to do the best they can and not dwell on making things perfectly or redoing an assignment until it's perfect. Helping them with being okay with doing their best without spending too much time. Other strategies, specific strategies they can do is to time themselves, keep a timer for assignments and the recommended amount of time spent for each subject, to use that as a guideline. Also removing all distractions, because sometimes that can happen. They can spend, and I'm not saying that's for everyone, but some students can spend a lot of time doing homework because they are not physically just doing that. In the meantime, they get distracted with either media on their computer or with their phones, or other external distractions, which is easy to do when you're working at home. So just having to look at what exactly is going on, identifying why they're spending so much time on homework, and then figuring out solutions from there. But yes, we want to encourage them to feel competent and efficient, and also communicating with your teachers, with their team, and coming up with solutions for that if the amount of homework is really high. Molly, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I love your suggestions. I think, the homework situation really has to be dealt with at the site level. And I don't mean to shirk the question, but it just seems to me that each site is different, and it depends also whether the student is there full-time in person on the hybrid learning program or full-time distance. So I think different students at different levels at different schools are experiencing there's not a lot of consistency across the board. And so if the student really is feeling overwhelmed and that too much work is being assigned, I think that really needs to be addressed at the site level. Okay, so it sounds like Swope Magnet 7th grade in person. So the magnet students have the option to attend 5 days in person full time. And I can't speak too much to what's happening at the middle school level because I work at the high school level.
Like Molly said, I would address it directly with the teachers, the team, and go from there and have a parent meeting and look at specifically for your student what is going on with the input from the teacher, because they do have, yes, any student can say, oh, I have so much work to do. Sometimes it's valid, and other times the teacher has a different perspective, and also they have suggestions they can help with. So having a parent meeting could be a good solution to find out what exactly is going on for that student.
Thank you. I was just trying to see if there are any other questions in the chat.
So I want to thank to everyone who's commenting about having found our presentation helpful today. Anything else? 2 more minutes.
There is a question from somebody to you, Molly. Are you at Reno High?
I just saw that.
Junior. Oh,
thank you. Oh. Yeah. So my office is remote. Our gate office is at Matley right now. I can work with students at Reno High. So the student just needs to be referred to me, and then when I work at many different schools throughout the district. So I work at Reno, McQueen, DeMonte, Galena. I work all over the district, but I coordinate my services with the site counselor and the site teams. So if you have a high school student and you would like me to check in with them to provide support, services, strategies, resources, I can do that. I just have to coordinate my services with, in this instance, it would be Reno High School, whoever their site counselor is. So we're in communication and we're both working to support the student, and we both are working toward the same goals with the student. Is there anything else?
Okay. Well, is six. There is one more, I think. How are teachers handling current pandemic related stresses, and what new resources are there for them?
That's a good question. So you probably know, because you interact with teachers and you see all of the changes going on in the district. I would say that our wellness department is, we receive emails with resources and opportunities to support wellness. And then as a department, at the counseling, we're in the gate department, but as the counseling department as a whole, we're looking at ways that school counselors can support teachers and site teams. So we do send out newsletters with resources. For instance, in one of our newsletters, we included a virtual calming room. So that's something teachers can go to. It has resources for meditation, mindfulness, yoga, things like that that they can do for self-care. Can you think of anything else, Julia?
No, that was, you touched on most of what I know too, so far.
So I guess, the other thing is through our employee assistance program, teachers and all Washoe County School District employees do have access to counseling and support through our employee assistance program. So that would be another way for teachers to receive support. I wanted to say one other thing. If you have a student that you think, so we're not therapists, we're school counselors, and we mostly, try to help kids be successful in school, both academically and socially and emotionally. However, if a child needs more resources, we also can make therapy referrals if a child was interested in more in-depth counseling.
And yes, I want to acknowledge, yes, these are very challenging times, and we appreciate you all participating today, but it is, I just want to acknowledge it is hard for all of us, and we just have to stick together, be supportive of each other, and we'll get through this. I think
very good. It's 6:33. If there is no more questions, we will end this session. I don't think there is any more questions. So thank you, Julia and Molly, for the class. It was a lot of good information. And also thank you to all the families that participate in this webinar.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just the last thing, putting a little evaluation there. If somebody wants to participate, you can just click on the links. There is a link for English and a link for Spanish. If you want to give us your feedback about the class, and you can just click on it and that will take you out of the meeting. I'll stay here for a couple of minutes for anybody that can participate in this survey, and the rest of the families can leave the session. They're free to go. And just last thing, once again, Julia and Molly, thank you so much for this session.
Thank you.